Well, I never considered myself to be an action film actor. There was action in the films.
What moves a man who rarely shows emotion on screen? Harrison Ford built a career on silence, on saying more with a glance than most actors manage with monologues.
Strong moral register. I think that's why I would say it's very nearly my favorite film.
Behind that weathered face and reluctant shrug lies something deeper than star power. It's judgment. Ford doesn't just perform characters, he inhabits principles. 6 films have shaped Ford's understanding of what it means to be a professional in an unprofessional world. These aren't acting studies or technical showcases. They're moral compasses, stories about men who do difficult things because someone has to. Ford has spent decades channeling their lessons into characters who face impossible choices with quiet determination. From Kurosawa's Samurai Code to Peckinpah's Outlaw Honor, from desert epics to trench warfare, Ford found templates for heroism that had nothing to do with Hollywood glamour. These directors taught him that real strength doesn't announce itself. It simply shows up when needed. Ford never studied method acting. He studied men under pressure, how they move, how they decide, how they endure. These 6 films became his academy, teaching him that the most powerful performance is often the most restrained one. Here are the movies that taught Harrison Ford how to be Harrison Ford, and why authentic masculinity never goes out of style, no matter how much the world changes around it. 6. The Wild Bunch, 1969. Peckinpah didn't romanticize outlaws. He gave them dignity in their final moments. When Ford discovered The Wild Bunch, he found something that would define his approach to aging characters facing obsolescence. This wasn't just a Western, it was a meditation on loyalty, professionalism, and what happens when the world no longer needs your particular skills.
In the character, that's something that I was ambitious for. I thought we'd better show another side of Indiana Jones if we...
The bunch weren't heroes in any traditional sense. They were aging bank robbers, violent men living by a code that civilization had already discarded. But Peckinpah found honor in their refusal to abandon each other, even when betrayal would have been easier. Ford saw himself in those weathered faces, professionals who understood that how you finish matters more than how you started. The film's brutal honesty about violence influenced Ford's later performances. No sanitized gunfights or clean deaths, just the messy, painful consequences of living by force. When the bunch makes their final stand, it's not about winning, it's about refusing to die on their knees. That philosophy runs through every Ford character who faces impossible odds with stubborn determination. Peckinpah's desert landscapes, unforgiving and eternal, became Ford's emotional geography. Places where men reveal their true nature when stripped of social pretenses. The film taught Ford that loyalty isn't about loving someone, it's about standing with them when everything goes wrong. The Wild Bunch showed Ford that the best way to exit any situation is fighting for something that matters, even if you're the last one standing. 5. Lawrence of Arabia, 1962. Lean didn't make an epic about a hero. He made a tragedy about what heroism costs. When Ford encountered Lawrence of Arabia, he discovered something that would haunt his performances for decades: the isolation that comes with being exceptional.
Under a controlled circumstance, to allow them to exercise their fears, and that's one of the great pleasures of these films.
The psychological price of doing what others cannot or will not do. Peter O'Toole's Lawrence wasn't a traditional leading man. He was brilliant, damaged, caught between cultures, and belonging fully to neither. Ford recognized something familiar in that isolation, the weight of being the guy everyone turns to when things fall apart. Lawrence's journey from idealistic officer to broken legend became Ford's roadmap for characters who discover that extraordinary circumstances reveal not just your strengths, but your fundamental flaws. Lean's desert cinematography, those endless landscapes that dwarfed human ambition, taught Ford about scale and proportion, how individual struggles play out against forces much larger than personal will. The film's patient character development, building Lawrence's legend and then systematically deconstructing it, influenced Ford's approach to roles that required both physical and psychological transformation. The film's exploration of cultural collision, where good intentions create unintended consequences, prefigures every Ford character who finds himself caught between competing loyalties. Lawrence's tragic recognition that he could never truly belong to the world he'd helped create resonated with Ford's own complicated relationship with fame and heroic expectations. O'Toole showed Ford that the biggest performances come from revealing vulnerability within strength, not hiding it beneath bravado. Paths of Glory, 1957. Kubrick proved that integrity survives even when everything else dies. When Ford first watched Paths of Glory, he witnessed something that would become central to his understanding of leadership.
And as I stand here before you tonight, older and wiser,
Kirk Douglas's Colonel Dax, fighting a battle he knows he cannot win, defending soldiers he cannot save, became Ford's template for doing what's right regardless of outcome. This wasn't war as adventure or patriotic spectacle. This was institutional betrayal made flesh. French generals ordering suicidal attacks to cover their own incompetence, then scapegoating enlisted men for their inevitable failure. Dax stands between corrupt authority and innocent victims, knowing his intervention will cost him everything and save no one. Ford saw himself in that impossible position, the professional caught between duty to superiors and responsibility to those under his protection. Kubrick's claustrophobic trenches, those narrow spaces where men waited to die for other men's ambitions, became Ford's emotional landscape. Every character he'd later play who faces systemic corruption with individual conscience. The film's courtroom sequences, where legal procedure becomes moral theater, taught Ford that sometimes the gesture matters more than its effectiveness. Douglas's performance, combining military bearing with barely controlled rage, showed Ford how authority could be wielded in service of justice rather than power. The film's devastating final scene, where individual mercy briefly interrupts institutional cruelty, became Ford's understanding of heroism. Not grand gestures or dramatic victories, but small acts of decency in indecent circumstances. Paths of Glory taught Ford that doing right isn't measured by success, but by the ability to live with your choices. 3. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, 1962. Ford's favorite director showed him that sometimes the myth serves people better than facts. When Ford encountered John Ford's masterpiece, he discovered something that would shape his entire understanding of heroism's complexity.
I like the film very much, and I want to do what I can to see that people will go to it.
Two men, one legend. The lawyer who gets the credit and the gunfighter who did the work. Ford learned that real heroes often remain invisible. Jimmy Stewart's Ransom Stoddard becomes a senator based on killing the notorious Liberty Valance. But it was John Wayne's Tom Doniphan who actually pulled the trigger from the shadows. The film's central irony, that civilization advances through hidden violence while crediting peaceful progress, became Ford's philosophy about necessary work that goes unrecognized. John Ford's visual poetry, those Monument Valley landscapes that made personal struggles feel mythic, taught Ford about the power of understatement. The film's famous line, "When the legend becomes fact, print the legend," became Ford's approach to screen presence. Sometimes what people need to believe matters more than what actually happened. The relationship between Stoddard and Doniphan, mutual respect between different types of strength, prefigured every Ford partnership where intellect and instinct complement each other. Wayne's Doniphan sacrifices his future so that Stewart's vision of justice can flourish, asking for nothing in return except the satisfaction of a job well done. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance taught Ford that authentic heroism doesn't require recognition. It requires understanding your role in something larger than yourself and playing it without seeking applause. 2. The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, 1948. Houston showed that the real treasure was what men lost searching for it. When Ford discovered the treasure of the Sierra Madre, he found a cautionary tale that would inform every character he'd play facing temptation.
I think if I had to pick just one film to which I had a very strong reaction and can remember.
3 partners venture into Mexican mountains seeking fortune, but the gold they find destroys everything that made their friendship valuable. Walter Houston's Howard, the grizzled prospector who understands that survival depends on maintaining your humanity, became Ford's model for wisdom earned through hard experience. While Dobbs descends into paranoid madness and Curtin struggles to stay decent, Howard represents the man who's seen enough to know that character matters more than wealth. Ford absorbed that lesson completely. The film's desert setting, unforgiving and isolating, strips away social pretenses and reveals who people really are when civilization disappears. Huston's direction never judges his characters harshly, but shows how ordinary men become monsters when greed overwhelms judgment. Ford learned that moral decay happens gradually, choice by choice, until you wake up as someone you wouldn't have recognized. The breakdown of trust between the three partners, each suspecting the others of planning betrayal, became Ford's template for relationships under extreme pressure. How quickly cooperation turns to suspicion when stakes get high enough. The film's tragic irony that the gold ultimately scatters worthlessly in the wind taught Ford that pursuing the wrong things costs you everything that actually matters. Sierra Madre showed Ford that staying human requires constant vigilance against your own worst impulses. 1. Seven Samurai, 1954. Kurosawa didn't make adventure films. He made testaments to duty. When Ford first encountered Seven Samurai, he discovered his cinematic soul.
Cold, rainy often. It was a tough shoot, tough movie to make.
Seven masterless warriors, each carrying their own approach to honor, unite to defend farmers they'll never see again. This wasn't heroism for glory or payment. This was professionalism elevated to a moral imperative. Each samurai brought different skills, different temperaments, and different reasons for accepting an impossible mission. Kanbei's seasoned leadership, Kyuso's deadly precision, Kikuchio's raw passion. Ford saw himself in their weathered faces, professionals who understood that competence without compassion is meaningless. The film's 3.5-hour runtime taught Ford that great stories require patience, that character development can't be rushed. Kurosawa's use of weather and terrain during battle sequences became Ford's understanding of how the environment shapes conflict. Rain turning earth to mud, wind affecting archery, terrain determining strategy. Nature as an active participant, not a passive backdrop. The film's democratic approach to heroism, where every defender matters regardless of status, influenced Ford's ensemble work in later films. The samurai's acceptance of probable death for strangers' protection became Ford's template for characters who do difficult things because someone has to. No speeches about duty, no philosophical debates, just quiet professionals handling business. The film's final image, three surviving samurai walking away while villagers celebrate their harvest, taught Ford that real heroes don't stick around for applause. Seven Samurai showed Ford that honor isn't about recognition. It's about being the person others can count on when everything falls apart. Ford doesn't study films for technique. He studies them for character. These 6 movies taught him that authentic heroism isn't about glory or recognition. It's about showing up when needed, doing what's necessary, and walking away without expecting thanks. 6 codes of honor, 1 uncompromising standard.